It's the same architect as the St. Paul Cathedral. That and the Basilica and the Cathedral in Sioux Falls. Masquerade was the architect, but Incarnations was unique that it was a sort of non-cathedral, non-basilica building to have the same architect. Was pretty unusual. And when I went over to look at Incarnation, I had never, before I went there, or even decided, you know, that I wanted to go there and was assigned there by Archbishop Roach. I had never actually been in there, so I was pretty aghast when I walked in, saw the sanctuary. Yeah, the sightlines, it wasn't as a mega, for me compared to the St. Paul Cathedral, it was much more cozy compared to the size of that. So presiding in there wasn't overwhelming at all. It seemed a lot warmer. And they responded to me pretty quickly, very quickly, actually. The inner city skills that I had learned at the cathedral were very useful, but compared to the cathedral, it was still a very family, people-based, not completely anonymous crowd. You know, at the cathedral, you have such a different crowd every week. You do have parishioners there and a group, but there was just so many visitors all the time that by comparison it seemed a lot more stable, familiar. Your family took me in pretty fast, and also the Kennys. Phil was still alive then, wonderful guy, and Joanne worked at the Chancery, so in the priest personnel office, and their family took me in too, in a lot of ways, and invited me to a lot of family stuff. Another family that really took me in were the Camproods. They owned a pizza place, and I went over there often to have their wonderful pizza. Great family, great children. Yeah, they were another family that really opened up their homes and life to me. There was an apartment building a couple of blocks from the church on Blaisdell there, 38th and Blaisdell, that had, we called it Incarnation Annex because it was filled with lots of people from Incarnation, mostly senior citizens. Many of them came to weekday liturgy and were involved in lots of things, and not just in a peripheral way. Those people did lots of, you know, Eucharistic ministry, decorating. They were, you know, working at the festivals or whatever.
Sure.
They did a lot. Diane Kresh, Diane and Lonnie and I all went to the same music program at St. Thomas and St. Kate's. So, and then for the three of us to be there at the same time for a few years was very special. We brought the chorale over from College of St. Catherine to Incarnation for a concert in, I think it was December of 1984, my first year there, and that was very special since we had all had the director of the chorale, Dr. Jones. All three of us had him in school, and he died in March of 1986. So we were very happy we could host him. He very much enjoyed coming over and having the three of us there to help host it. Yeah, I think it was a Christmas concert. Bob has been there since 1978, and so when I went there, he had been there 6 years, so he'd been there a few years. And theologically, we were very close to the same ballpark, and we knew that right away, and that was really good. And I learned a lot of practical things from him, and I knew theologically if we came up with some kind of a, whatever it was liturgically, that I was in a safe place. I didn't have to wonder if he'll, you know, slap it down, nor did he have to worry that I'd slap it down. We had very little of that. And he was a very good preacher, so I could learn a lot from that. He was the classic introvert, and I'm the classic extrovert, although as the older I get, I'm a little more, I'm quieter than I used to be, although I'm still an extrovert. But that was fine because it was pretty good. That was a pretty good balance, really. It complemented each other quite well. I just learned a lot from him and other. I've mentioned Lonnie several times. I just owe a tremendous amount to her. And Kathy Itzen, whose commitment to social justice stuff. I mean, we talk about she was always collecting something, food or clothing or something, and just tireless energy doing it. Carol Berline, our business administrator, also was just very, very hardworking, would always go the extra mile. Carrie Kanowitz, same thing, as our parish secretary, as the youngest person on our full-time staff. Just amazing what she could do and the rabbits she could pull out of her hat. We got a lot of people coming to ask for help, and once in a while we'd get a con artist. And it was always an interesting task to figure out who was real and who wasn't. I mean, I had done some of that at the cathedral too, you know, but there was one in particular that I remember. This person came on crutches and gave us this whole story, and I think somebody tipped us off from another church that if this person comes, it's bogus, or somehow we knew that it was bogus. And they, when we said no, I remember they were extremely upset, and some words flew our way, and etc. And when they got to the end of the sidewalk in front of the rectory, and my office was right there, well, they put the crutches down and walked away. So we knew that one was a con, but they weren't all cons.
Sure.
Carol Berline, the business administrator, would help decide it. Carrie would help decide it. Kathy often did. I was in on it sometimes. It kind of depended on who was there, and it also depended on what they needed. And sometimes some of the clothing drives, Kathy didn't have anywhere else to put the clothes. Sometimes they were just on the inside. When you opened the door, they were around the corner, so sometimes we just handed it out from there. And we had a food shelf. I think that was in the lower level of the rectory. That, I remember, that was a pretty regular thing. So that wasn't very different from my first church. And that was a very regular thing. The social outreach, that was. I mean, it stayed with me. The majority that came for help needed help, and the cons came once in a while.
Right.
But there's certain things that cons often do. They usually demand rather than ask. And they're very, very happy 100th anniversary to the Church of the Incarnation, my second church, which I was at for those 3 years, between the ages of 30 and 33. Many good times, many good memories, many new ministry skills that I learned. I grew up a lot during those years in a very good way. I drive past the church in that area very often and always think kind thoughts when I do so.